Major funding for this program is made possible by grants from Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, and Perfect Building Maintenance, KILROY Architectural Windows, Inc., New York's Window Company, New York Community Bank, Capital One Bank, Greenberg Traurig, LLP. Additional funding is provided by grants from Akron Gold Brothers, LLC, Briarwood Organization, Beechwood Organization, C.B. Richard Ellis, Cushman and Wakefield, Dime Savings Bank of Williamsburg, Hal Fettner, Durst Fettner Residential, First American Title Insurance Company of New York, Friedman, LLP, Gemini Real Estate Advisors, LLC, Jack Jaffa and Associates Real Estate Consultants, James D. KUHN Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, Madison Realty Capital, Massey Knackel Realty Services, Meridian Capital Group, M&T Bank, Muss Development, LLC, Des Moines Group, Newmark Knight Frank, ORPHANIDES and Associates, SJP Properties, Sterling and Sterling, Stonehenge Partners, Urban American, W Financial Mortgage Fund, the Wickoff Group.
Hello, my name is Michael Stoller. 2010, we hope, is going to be a good year in the real estate market. We've had some difficult years, but today I've assembled a group of individuals who are going to provide their insight on where they see the market with regard to the office retail market in the tri-state region. My guests today include Jay Goldstein, who is the chairman of the real estate group at Friedman, LLP. Scott Handler, who's the principal at the Handler Realty Services. Michael Sieve, who's the president at Mountain Development. And last but not least, a returnee, Anthony Westreich, who is the president and CEO of Monday Properties. Anthony, you have properties in New York City, you have properties in the Washington, D.C. area. So where do you see the market today? What's happening?
It's a famous Charles Dickens quote. It's a tale of two cities. In New York City, I think we all know it's been very difficult with the loss of all the financial services and insurance jobs. I think to date, 150,000 jobs lost in New York City. So the leasing market in New York City has been slow, to say the least. Everybody feels like it's stabilized, but rents are still down, concessions are still up, and it's a tough market.
Do you think we've seen a bottom to the rents, or do you think they can go down even lower?
I'm always optimistic. I think we've hit a bottom. I don't think you see the desperation, but you don't see any accretive growth for sure. So you're not going to see rent growth.
And what about in the Washington, D.C., Maryland area?
Well, you got to be careful in D.C. It's a market of 16 submarkets in Washington, D.C. Right. So there's really only 5 that I view as supply constrained. For the stuff we have there, the majority of it's in a market called Roslyn, which is right across the Key Bridge from Georgetown. That's a 5% vacancy market. We're 98% leased in that market. Rent growth, the last 3 deals we did have been high water marks for that submarket. So it's been a great market for us. We've had a lot of fun down there.
Scott, you and your family have owned properties in New York City, probably certain of the properties may longer than you're alive in certain instances. How do you see the market today? Over your last 30, you've been in the business over 30 years today. What do you see?
You know, the fact is that one of the policies that we followed is that we've tried to keep rents below what our competitors have been doing. So if the market was high, we were able to rent relatively well because our rents were maybe $10, $15 below that. I think right now things are difficult all the way around. Most of the properties we have are in the garment district.
I think there's a change.
Times Square South.
Times Square South?
Well, you know, when you're in 41st and Broadway, that's Times Square South. I can't speak to the side street buildings.
Oh boy, that was.
Don't underestimate those side street buildings. They,
We used to own some of those.
Okay, you own it.
Yeah.
So you'd say in the Garment Center, Times Square South, it's.
Garment Center, Times
It's all
Square
about
South.
cash flow, guys.
Absolutely.
Okay. Wait, the
Absolutely.
constantly will ask his question in a second. Michael, I mean, Mountain Development has properties in New Jersey, Connecticut, and you have one in New York City and others. How do you see, and we were talking part of the show, that Jersey is a market that basically has been partially insulated because the rents haven't really ever risen too high, and they really haven't gone down too much. So how do you see the market?
That's a good description. You know, I think there are a lot of things that make the market different in New Jersey. Number one is, you know, the rents are pretty flat, you know, and they're relatively flat now and they were relatively flat before, so I guess in some respects it insulates us from what's going on. And the buildings are more manageable size-wise, so from a financing standpoint it seems to be easier to get business done in New Jersey. I think 2010, probably like a lot of these other markets, there's going to be some really nice opportunities. And the thing that I would differentiate New Jersey and some of the suburban office markets from is that in the suburbs where the buildings are smaller, you can really remake a building for a tenant. Other than,
What do you mean by remake a building?
you know, the line between owner and developer is just more blurred in New Jersey. You know, tenant requirements can become central to the way you redesign a building. You know, when a tenant takes space in New Jersey, particularly a big tenant, you can remake the way you cool the building. You can remake the entryway. You can remake the building to meet the needs of those tenants. What's nice about a market like this is that tenants have the opportunity to really assess the way they use their space, take advantage of pricing that maybe wasn't available for owners. If they can acquire a building on the right terms, have the same opportunity. Sometimes those opportunities, which don't come along in a very hot market or a space-constrained market, let you do things that are fun and exciting that you couldn't otherwise do.
So, Counselor, I mean, you've been around the market as long as I have. You know, you're the advisor and counselor with these people and many others. How do you and your clients see the market today?
Well, I think if you're focused in New York, there are tremendous difficulties, especially if you're focused in the commercial real estate market, and everybody's looking at when their mortgages are coming up. That's the focus and how they're going to refinance and recapitalize. So, from that perspective, it's not a lot of fun. The other side of the coin is that we have lots of clients who have properties they've held for a long time, and they're talking about how to reposition those properties and hold on to their.
So how do you, and I think that's a good point, reposition, I'd like everyone else. How do you reposition a property, you know?
I think what's going on in the city with owners who have a lot of foresight is they're going out and spending money on improving the lobbies, the common spaces, upgrading their buildings. Certainly if you own an A building, you've probably done that in the last few years. But if you have a property that's older, I think there's a lot of money being put into those properties. For instance, we're at 1700 Broadway. It's a Rubin-owned property, and after 40 years, they're redoing the lobby, and it's, you know, going to be very nice.
You know, you own 3 different types of buildings. You've owned a number of others in the city. You own the classic 230 Park Avenue, 1440 Broadway, and 386 Park Avenue South. You know, so I'd say one is like a B plus or an A minus. Another one is B plus, and the other one is a B. Right? How do you attract and how do you get tenants in this market today? What the interesting thing is that tenants want to deal with all 3 of you because you're well capitalized, under-financed landlords for a couple of reasons. So the broker who's bringing you the deal is happy because they know they're going to get paid a commission, and you have the capability and the wherewithal to put in money to improve the tenant. So what is a tenant, you know, how do you look at a tenant when they come to you? And I'd like, you know, today when they say, hey, I want to sign a lease. You were talking about this law firm just recently.
Well, I think now more than ever, and I think you were alluding to, I think now more than ever, it's the owners and the operators who are hands-on and who are good owners and good operators who truly are able to attract and retain tenants, more than ever, because tenants have a choice. And it's a bit of a fight out there. But for us, it's meeting with the tenants, it's offering high concession packages, it's making sure the brokers are taken care of, it's being realistic on where the market rents are, and don't be overreaching.
I noticed something, I think it was one of the publications, and I got a press release on this. There's a landlord who took over a building and gutted the building. I mean, it's a 6th Avenue property, a B property, and is offering, in addition to the brokerage commission, $140,000 if a broker brings in a tenant for a full floor, or 280. I mean, you know, it's huge. You know, it's like winning the Super Bowl, and that's what they called it, the Super Bowl situation. I mean, do you think you have to be that aggressive in 2010, especially since we've said that the market may have neared the bottom?
Well, I'd be, if I was a tenant, I'd be very wary of a broker who is interested in an extra $140,000 for me to go to that building.
That's for sure.
It's obviously not focusing on the tenant's requirements. It's focusing on their bottom line, their commission. So we would never do that, but it shows how desperate that landlord is.
No, I think that's the interesting. You know, we were talking prior to the show, and I'd like anyone to, you know, come in on this point with regard to financing. You know, the inability, you know, and we were talking that I said there is money, and you said there is, but under certain terms and conditions. How are you seeing financing for some properties that you've done, and some properties, and also for your clients? Mike?
You know, I'll give you a specific answer because it merits it. We've done a lot of business over the past year with M&T Bank, who I would consider to be a leader amongst regional banks. And our experience has been that not only are they open for business, but they've got a really good sense of the market. They've got a really good sense of what's involved in getting space leased if it's not leased, or getting construction projects finished if they're not finished. In a market like this, they make a very good partner for a long-term owner-operator. We have a relationship with them, probably like a lot of people do with their banks, that spans just credit. We're a depositor. We have a true banking relationship with them. But not different than the relationships with tenants. In a down market, you know who your friends are, and you know which relationships are a lot deeper than just one transaction, and those are the ones that you sort of savor. And in a market like this, those are the ones that can lead to some exciting opportunities.
I mean, you guys don't have much debt on your property, so.
Historically, we have not, I guess because of the length of which we've owned the properties, but most of our properties, or at least my family properties, are without debt. It's, you know, it's one thing to be able to ride out a market like we're in, when you're not having to worry about what your partner wants in the way of payments at each month. So having no debt, although in certain instances is unrealistic, it's preferable.
Anthony, how are you seeing dealing with the banks today?
It's difficult. I mean, the markets we operate in, the prices are much larger. The M&T banks, which I'm a big fan of, they're not going to do the loan sizing that we need on a large Manhattan office building. It's just the reality. And so the debt markets, our experience of the debt markets today, it's frozen. That being said, we're refinancing a bunch of properties down in Washington, D.C. right now, and we've literally had banks, insurance companies, and other types of groups really falling all over themselves for the right type of debt yield and the right type of product and the right type of sponsor. So it really, a lot of conditions to weigh in, but I would argue overall the debt markets are frozen right now.
I'll tell you a funny story, talking about history. Back in 1986, I met Scott's dad for the first time, and it was just after there was a new tax law passed in September of 1986. The passive loss regulations came in, and they first turned out to be very restrictive. So in December, I was meeting with him, and I remember saying to him, you own 4 properties, no debt. I said, you have an opportunity to go out into the debt market and expand your business. And I know you're very experienced at what you do. I don't remember the examination, the conversation word for word, but he turns to me and he says, Jay, my father told me something. He said, it's better to know that you own 4 buildings than think you own 15 buildings. And, you know, in times like this, it proves well. It's impossible to do in New York, I think, really today, or almost impossible to do, except if you have, you know, big equity contributions. But if you go out into the mortgage market like everybody else, it's, everybody's looking at the due date of their mortgages.
I think relating to what Anthony said, large deals are difficult
right.
because banks really don't want to lend more than $25 million, $30 million at a clip. So you have to put the syndication group together.
Yeah.
And to put the syndication of different personalities from different countries, and I mean, that's really the situation, because the syndicates, the foreign banks are lending, they have to go to Hamburg, or they have to go to Basel, or they have to go to France, and then you got to get the domestic who may have to go to Chevy Chase or somewhere other place, or Charlotte. It's not an easy personality. So but something may be good in this situation. There is a lot of capital. I mean, you've had some great investors. You've had Goldman, you had Whitehall, you've had good people. You've had investors also. Investors are sitting with money today. There's lots of money. Some of the people that you and I know personally have money sitting on the sidelines. When do you think investors are going to take the opportunity to go into the market and buy?
Well, once again, the debt markets will need to open up. There'll need to be real transactions so people can point to quantifiable metrics to really see where value is. And when you have 9 or 10 buildings trading a year in New York like last year as compared to 180 in the previous years, that's not a quantifiable metric. So people will put their toe in the water, but they're afraid to jump in.
I think on mass, it's very hard to say, but I think clearly on select situations, investors are jumping in now. We bought a little building at the end of the year where we thought we got a very fair deal, and it was a nice opportunity, and we offered it to some friends, and we were sort of oversubscribed. And I think people sense that now, the opportunities are going to come, and then there'll be a point when everyone's realized they've come, and then there won't be such good opportunities anymore. So, I don't know that the consensus is that there are opportunities, but I think people do recognize on a one-off basis today, good things are coming to the top.
Counselor, here's my question. I shouldn't call you counselor, I should call you consigliere. Consigliere, the situation is people have money and the banks are paying no interest. The market, I think I myself and many other people are worried. Obama land changes daily. It could be over 10,000, but it could go back to 8,000 on the situation. There was a time people were putting in mattresses in 2008. They were taking money out of the bank literally because they were worried about the bank. So where are your clients who have capital? What are they doing with it?
Well, they're really sitting on the sidelines, and if they're either in some brokerage house earning a fraction of a percent, or they're in some bank, or they're in T-bills earning nothing. But there's a lot of money sitting on the sidelines. People are really conflicted about what to do.
Well, look at the public REIT sector, right? The REITs are trading at a 30% premium to net asset values. So people believe in real estate in the right markets, and they like the liquidity of a public REIT.
Look at the REITs. They raised $16 billion.
Well,
that's exactly right.
$16 billion last year for REITs, plus that was in the IPO market, and then they raised another $9 billion over there.
Sure.
So they have the capability.
I would think that part of that premium is an indicator that people feel that there are going to be such compelling opportunities for the REITs, that part of what they're paying for is guys that are going to be well positioned to make good acquisitions over the next 24 months.
They're putting the appreciation in their price. Yeah.
Now, my question is: you've been in the office business all the life. You have office. At times you have.
I was office technology office.
But your office. You have retail. Some industrial,
some medical, and some technology.
So if you saw an opportunity, what would you change? Would you leave the office? Would you go into the residential? Would you?
I think you got to stick to your knitting. I grew up in commercial real estate and hope to spend the rest of my life.
So you
doing
like office?
That's what I know. Can't say residential's wrong or retail's wrong. It's just what I know.
I agree. I think that this is a good market to double down on the things you know well, to remind tenants of the ways you can work well together, not necessarily to try to become an expert in something new.
You bring up a good point on retail. You have retail, and you have retail, and you have retail clients. How's retail doing? Have rents come down in the retail on 7th Avenue? Where do we stand today on retail?
I don't think I'm a good barometer. We have retail which complements our office buildings, and we've managed to keep it full. But you shouldn't turn to me for retail opinion.
No, I wasn't. I, you
I'm in the same
know,
position
I was
on
only. I was
retailers.
really only talking about your locations. I'm not talking about, you know, as you said. I think the retail that you have complements your office buildings. It's
I
not,
mean, we Bobby Van's Steakhouse, we renewed them at a pretty high rent. People are still buying steaks and drinking vodka, so
I think they're drinking more.
probably right.
You know,
I hope they are. That's where the margins are.
Right.
Right.
Our experience has been, our retail is different, and it's sort of standalone enclosed malls, and we've had to be really creative over the past year in terms of finding people who are maybe not exactly retailers to complement our mix. So it's been a challenge, but in some respects it's been really rewarding. We did a deal, we had a vacant box at the back of an enclosed mall that had always been a challenge to lease, and in this environment was a special challenge to lease. And we ended up making a spectacular deal with a baseball academy where they train, you know, kids to bat, to run, to field. All of the kids will shop at our food court, all of whom is on percentage rent, and all of their parents will hopefully get bored after watching their kids for 5 minutes and go shop in the mall. So that's
Sounds
sort
like
of been
a
our
win.
story in retail. You have to be very creative.
Now you've been in retail, your own retail. I mean, you've been in the
Sure.
restaurant, food business. So how do you see the?
Well, the sad part, I happen to live on Long Island, and you ride down some of the main drags of Long Island, whether it be Northern Boulevard or Jericho Turnpike, and you see all the retail that was there 2 to 3 years ago. Not all of the retail, but much of the retail is closed. The car dealerships are a disaster. The GM dealerships have closed up. It's a problem.
But what about the retail? I mean, you have interests in yourself and your clients in the restaurant business in New York City.
Right. Well, surprisingly enough, from my sense of it is, the good restaurants are doing fine. Not maybe as good as they did a few years ago, but they're there, they're in business, and they're crowded, and you still need reservations. And you can do that any night of the week in New York, and trying to get into a fine restaurant, it's difficult. So, you know, I don't think things are that terrible. But there are a lot of smaller, you know.
I did a show a couple years ago on restaurants, and I've had a potpourri of people who own, you know, Drew Naparent, Danny Meyer, and you know, name it. And we've had them. And what's happening, which is interesting in it, is that there are, New York City is under retail. New York City specifically is under retail, and there's some new retailers coming into New York. I mean, 230 Park, Bobby Van's. If Bobby Van's wasn't there, probably someone else would take it, because there is a big need in the Grand Central neighborhood right over there for that, the restaurant, plus you have the Grand Central Station and everything over there. But New Jersey, Bobby Flay's opened up Bobby's Burgers, and you know, Danny Meyer's opening up another steak shack on 86th Street. So, you know, sometimes...
And you've seen these Apple stores open up. They're always busy. It's the most unbelievable
It's a whole subculture.
thing. Absolutely.
I was going to say, if there's a silver lining to a softer market, it's a nice opportunity for new up-and-coming retail entrepreneurs to have an opportunity to really test something out without, you know, the kind of risk that you'd have signing a lease in a different market. And you've got more owners who are open to doing experimental partnership-type deals, and sometimes the results are terrific things like the Apple Store.
I think what it relates is exactly what you're saying, but it also relates to the fact that you have to have owners who have strength and capability, you know, good clients of Jay's, or people who are well capitalized. Because there are owners who have been on my panels and other things, and they basically said, you know, I remember one of them who's maybe a friend of yours, and he said, you know, somebody comes to me, they want $80 in tenant improvements, they want a year's free rent, and I have to go to my bank. I don't have enough money. And this is a problem. I mean, so, you know, it is a good time for tenants. Would you agree? It's a
great time for tenants, and tenants who have a belief in their business. I think, listen, in 2008, you really saw no activity. Everybody was acting out of fear. 2009, you saw activity. Tenants who were trying to renew early were successfully renewing early, and they should be if they believe in their business. So it's a great time for tenants. And it depends where you hit the cycle.
I mean, there was 2 million square feet of office space leased in the month of December. in 2009. In December of 2008, they were lucky if they leased 130,000
Well,
square
2 million square feet is about 20% above the historical norm for monthly leasing, which is a
But
good data point.
It was a good data point, but it was also a lot of renewals.
Sure.
Lots of renewals. Did you see that in your buildings too?
Lots of renewals. They've restructured. They're taking advantage of what the market is today. They're looking at either the size of what the space they have, and they're taking advantage of where we are. Whereas I think one of the numbers that's been thrown around is about a 30% reduction, 40% reduction in rents.
I would argue it's higher on a net effective basis.
Yeah.
Which is scary.
What are you seeing with your clients? I mean, how do you know? They come to you. They're asking for tax advice. They're asking, and how are you telling them? What are you trying?
Well, basically, the advice now is not on an acquisition, as you know. It's what's going to happen when the debt is restructured, and what kind of cancellation of debt into income am I going to pick up? When am I going to pick it up?
I think that's
all
a
that
very
stuff.
interesting point. When I spoke for the New York State Society of CPA, the panel before I spoke, they had certain tax experts talking about are you aware of what happens when you have to take over your debt, or you have a reduction in debt, and all this situation. So it's a very technical time.
It's a very technical time, and it's a very creative time, and it's extremely important because the tax rates are probably headed up, and if you can defer / eliminate the COD income, and there are ways to do that, you're in a good place, but it's difficult. It's very difficult.
Just as an interesting aside, I remember some people said, if you had a relative who was in the hospital on December 31st, you wanted them to wait until the new year because of the cancellation of the estate taxes.
That's right.
Well,
that's a real never land right now.
I think the general feeling is that we have some cautious optimism.
Yeah, I think
for the new year.
What goes down must come up, right?
No question. As Norman Sterner used to say, it's like airplanes. They always have to go up. I said, Norman, prices can go down, and they have gone down. I'd like to thank Jay Goldstein, Scott Handler, Michael Seed, and Anthony Westreich. See you next week.
Major funding for this program is made possible by grants from Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, and Perfect Building Maintenance, KILROY Architectural Windows, Inc., New York's Window Company, New York Community Bank, Capital One Bank, Greenberg Traurig, LLP. Additional funding is provided by grants from Akron Gold Brothers, LLC, Briarwood Organization, Beechwood Organization, C.B. Richard Ellis, Cushman and Wakefield, Dime Savings Bank of Williamsburg, Hal Fettner, Durst Fettner Residential, First American Title Insurance Company of New York, Friedman, LLP, Gemini Real Estate Advisors, LLC, Jack Jaffa and Associates Real Estate Consultants, James D. KUHN Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, Madison Realty Capital, Massey Knackel Realty Services, Meridian Capital Group, M&T Bank, Muss Development, LLC, Des Moines Group, Newmark Knight Frank, ORPHANIDES and Associates, SJP Properties, Sterling and Sterling, Stonehenge Partners, Urban American, W Financial Mortgage Fund, the Witkoff Group.